It was a typical Wednesday afternoon in the sleepy town of Brookhaven. The weather was unremarkable, with an overcast sky and the faint smell of rain in the air. As the city crooned along with its quiet pace, something happened that would shatter its sense of security forever. On that seemingly ordinary afternoon, a lone police officer was making his rounds when he spotted something unexpected. There, on the old Miller's Bridge, long known for its rusty iron rails and weathered wooden planks, sat an abandoned car. Nothing too unusual at first. Abandoned cars weren't a rare sight in this town, but this one was different. It was an older model, a classic car from the late 70s, its paint faded by time, with its front bumper slightly askew. As the officer approached, a sense of unease began to settle over him. He circled the car, peering through the fogged windows. Nothing inside. No sign of a struggle or any indication of who had left it there. But something was wrong. He couldn't shake the feeling that the car had been sitting there far longer than it appeared. When the officer ran the car's license plate, a chill ran down his spine. The car had been reported missing in 1979. A vehicle that had vanished almost 4 decades ago now appeared out of thin air on a bridge that had witnessed decades of history pass by. But that wasn't the most unsettling part. When investigators arrived at the scene, they discovered something that made the car's mysterious appearance even more baffling. Inside the vehicle, tucked carefully under the seat, was a photograph. The photo showed a family of 3, 2 adults and a child, standing in front of the very bridge. The picture was dated 1979. The family was smiling, unaware of the ominous fate that was about to befall them. Who were these people? And why had their car shown up after nearly 40 years, seemingly frozen in time? What had happened to the family, and where had they gone? The Miller's Bridge had always been a quiet landmark, known only to the locals. It spanned across a narrow, slow-moving creek and was often used by commuters to cut through the back roads. It was nothing spectacular, rusty, old, and largely forgotten by anyone who wasn't local. However, it had seen its fair share of tragedies, accidents, and untold stories. But nothing had ever been as strange as the sight that greeted the officer that afternoon. The car, the photograph, and the unsettling mystery of the family all seemed to be connected to the bridge in some unfathomable way. The more the investigation unfolded, the more mysterious details emerged. The car had belonged to a family by the name of the Whitakers. Henry, the father, his wife Ruth, and their young daughter Ellie. The Whitakers had been reported missing in 1979, and their disappearance had been labeled an unsolved cold case. But now the car, which had vanished with them, had reappeared in the exact spot where their last known photograph had been taken. The bridge, with its dark, rusted edges and forgotten history, stood as a silent witness to an unimaginable tragedy. But there were no obvious answers. The Whitakers' disappearance was no accident. This wasn't just a missing persons case. This was something far darker, something buried in time itself. As detectives began investigating the case, they uncovered that there were no witnesses to the Whitakers' disappearance. Their family had simply vanished. Local reports from 1979 indicated that they had left their home for a road trip, intending to visit a nearby town, but they had never arrived. What struck investigators most was that there had been no real evidence of foul play. The house was found exactly as they had left it, untouched. No signs of struggle, no messages, just an empty, silent home with no explanation. The family's disappearance was nothing short of a mystery that had puzzled Brookhaven for years. But now, 40 years later, the car had mysteriously appeared on the bridge, and that was when the questions really began. Why was it just now being found? Was this some sort of twisted message, or was it the product of a much darker conspiracy? What had happened to the Whitakers all those years ago, and who had been hiding the truth? The Whitakers were well-liked members of the Brookhaven community. Henry Whitaker had been a high school history teacher, known for his passion for teaching and his fondness for road trips. Ruth, his wife, had been a homemaker, deeply involved in local charities. Their daughter, Ellie, was a quiet child, a straight-A student who had a love for art and would often be seen sketching in her notebook at the park. But their sudden disappearance had always raised more questions than answers. In the aftermath of their vanishing, some whispered that the Whitakers had become involved in something they shouldn't have, some sort of underground movement or a government secret. However, no concrete evidence ever surfaced to suggest any of these theories was true. The authorities had long assumed the Whitakers had fallen victim to a tragic accident, their bodies lost forever, perhaps swept away in a flood or something far more sinister. But nothing was ever found to prove this. That was until the reappearance of the car in 2019. With the photograph tucked inside the car, the investigation seemed to be taking a turn. The photo showed the Whitaker family, standing in front of the Miller's Bridge with smiles on their faces, unaware that their future was about to be stolen from them. Local historian and retired detective Frank Barlow had been following the case for years. He had watched as the Whitaker disappearance became more of a local legend than a serious case. But Frank wasn't so quick to dismiss the mysteries of the past. When he saw the photograph of the Whitaker family, he instantly knew that the car had been deliberately placed there. It wasn't an accident. "There's something about this bridge," Frank said, his voice filled with uncertainty. "The truth behind their disappearance, it's all tied up in the past. The family, they didn't just disappear. They were erased, and someone's been hiding it ever since." Frank's suspicions led him to re-examine old reports, and what he found only deepened the mystery. He uncovered a connection between the Whitakers and a powerful corporation, one that had been involved in research projects from the 70s. A company with deep ties to government contracts and an interest in unexplained phenomena. With the discovery of the car and the photograph, the investigation went into overdrive. Forensics examined every inch of the car, from the fingerprints to the tire tracks to the condition of the interior. They couldn't find much, except for one unsettling detail. The tires were too clean for a car that had been sitting there for decades. There was also the disturbing fact that the car had no visible signs of aging. The tires, the dashboard, and the leather seats were almost too pristine. There was no rust, no deterioration. It was as if the car had been parked there, untouched, for years, defying the passage of time. At first, the investigation seemed to go nowhere. But then a breakthrough came when the forensic team found traces of a substance in the car that didn't belong, an unusual chemical residue that had been linked to military-grade equipment used in covert government projects. This discovery opened up a whole new avenue of investigation. The Whitakers had been involved with something much bigger than anyone had ever imagined. The investigation took a dark turn when a former employee of the mysterious corporation came forward. His name was Edward Hayes, a former researcher who had worked for the company in the late 1970s. Edward revealed that the company had been involved in government-funded research on experimental technologies designed to alter the very fabric of reality. They were trying to create a kind of time manipulation, Edward explained. They thought they could erase people's identities, manipulate time, even disappear entire families. The Whitakers were caught in the middle of that research. Edward's testimony was chilling. The family had been part of a government experiment, one that involved erasing people from the very fabric of time itself. They had been used as guinea pigs in a project that aimed to manipulate the past, present, and future. But something had gone horribly wrong. The Whitakers had been erased from existence, literally. Their records were deleted, their pasts scrubbed clean, and they had been made to disappear without a trace. But the car? The car had been left behind as a message. The Whitakers hadn't just disappeared, they had been manipulated. And now, after nearly 40 years, their disappearance was starting to resurface, revealing a dark government conspiracy. As the investigation grew more complex, new revelations began to emerge. It wasn't just the Whitakers who had been erased. There were other families, other individuals, whose identities had been wiped clean. They had all been part of the same covert government operation, Project Kronos, a project designed to manipulate and control time. The more the investigation unraveled, the more it became clear that the Whitakers had been the first victims of a much larger conspiracy. And as the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, the true scale of the operation became apparent. The final shock came when it was revealed that the car found on the bridge wasn't just a message, it was a warning. Someone, somewhere, didn't want the truth to come out. And now it was up to Frank and the investigators to expose the conspiracy before it was too late. The mystery of the Whitakers and their connection to Project Kronos had left an indelible mark on Brookhaven and beyond. It had exposed a dark chapter of government experimentation and forced the world to reckon with the consequences of manipulating time. But even as the case was closed, the lingering question remained. How many more families had been erased from history? And what other secrets were still buried, waiting to be uncovered? The car, once thought to be an abandoned relic, had become a symbol of something much bigger. A reminder that some truths, once hidden, never truly disappear.